So a few of the things that were accomplished this year, one was the child tax credit, and that provided tax cuts for more than 70,000 families in just our district alone. $400 million for housing and services for people experiencing homelessness, once-in-a-generation investment in the infrastructure. Now, do you remember how many times Trump declared Infrastructure Week? It was like at least once every other month, but never accomplished one thing. So this was a historic piece of legislation, the infrastructure package, and I'm proud to say that within that infrastructure package, my legislation that allows federal funds to be used and prioritized for people that live in the area. So we see these big infrastructure packages being passed and projects being developed in our areas, but the people that live in the very neighborhoods where unemployment is high cannot be prioritized in terms of hiring. And so we were able to pass legislation so that you can prioritize people that live in the neighborhoods. We passed for the second time the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act out of the House, and you know I was in charge of that. And so, unfortunately, we weren't able to get it passed out of the Senate, but it was an accomplishment from the House. We also passed immigration reform out of the House. We looked at a lot of ways to address some of the root causes of our problems, like homelessness, for example, by passing child welfare reform laws. You know, two categories of people who are unhoused are former foster youth who have aged out of the system, and all that means is that we cut them off from benefits when they turn 18 or 21, and people who are formerly incarcerated. Two areas where I have worked on passing legislation for a long time. And so I am very happy that we were able to get those things done. But let me just also, because I'm looking in the queue and there's a number of people that are asking questions about the unhoused in our area. And I will tell you that from my point of view, having 40,000 people who are unhoused on the streets, living in tents in the second largest city in the country, I think that is an absolute crisis. It is a public health, a public safety, and a humanitarian crisis that needs to be addressed immediately. And frankly, I'm really worried about this because soon the benefits, the safety net that was provided by the legislation that we've passed, not BBB that didn't pass, but the other pieces of legislation are going to run out soon. And we have tens of thousands of people in Los Angeles who are on the verge of homelessness at any moment. And when those supports go away, I'm worried that there might be even more people that are unhoused. And I think at some point we have to stop dealing with this problem in a tepid way, and we need to deal with this problem as though we have had a major natural disaster like an earthquake. When you have an earthquake, you don't sit around and take your time dealing with things. You understand the urgency, and you remove all barriers and just get it done. And so within the bills that were passed, we had $115 million for Project Home Key. Project Home Key is the interim and permanent supportive housing for individuals experiencing homelessness. And Project Room Key allowed the city to rent out entire hotels. And my concern, of course, is what happens when all of that goes away. We also provided support to landlords because we know that most of the people who own property, most of the renters live in buildings that are owned by mom and pop owners. My father, for example, was an example of that. My father bought a triplex on Crescent Heights, and he bought that to to make sure that his mother had a safe place to live. And so that triplex, it was 3 units. His mother lived in one, and he rented out 2. Well, you know, my father, unfortunately, is gone. But if he were here now and living in COVID and his tenants can't pay the rent anymore, We have to make sure the tenants aren't put out on the street, but we also have to make sure that he could pay his mortgage. So we needed to have resources for landlords, and that was directed at mom and pop landlords, not corporate landlords. And so we were able to get a number of things done. The other area that I work on, child welfare, we worked with a number of foster youth who told us that they were being left behind because of COVID, and they needed to have specific support. And so we were able to put resources for former foster youth in the rescue bills. So why don't we go to questions? Daryl from Mar Vista is asking a question. He wants to know, what are the odds that the Senate acts next year on important issues like voting rights? I can't tell you today what the secret is that the president needs to have, but we have got to force a vote on this issue. Personally, I think we absolutely need to get rid of the filibuster. But even if we got rid of the filibuster today and you have Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema saying they still won't vote for it, it doesn't help us. But we absolutely need to figure out how we can force folks to not restrict our democracy. I work on foreign policy, and when other countries do this, when other countries restrict voting, we sanction them. We cut foreign aid, and here it is, we're doing the same thing. I'm also upset with this parliamentarian because it's like, the minority party hires the parliamentarian, but yet between her and Joe Manchin, it's the two of them that keep blocking things. Greg from Mar Vista has a question. If he could ask his question.
Absolutely. Let's get Greg up live. Greg, you're live. Please go ahead.
Yes, my question is in relationship to small businesses, mom and pops like myself. It seems to me that we are not really in any discussion. The PPP were loans that were given out to companies, corporations, nonprofits that were forgiven, yet we were only allowed to have access to loans that we have to pay back. So my question is there any thought being given to how to help the really small business person?
You know what, Greg? It hurts my heart to hear your question because, when we were passing these bills, the only businesses we really had in mind, and I'm telling you I know there's some other we's that only care about big businesses, but that's not where we were coming from at all. The whole point was to make sure that people like you were left whole. And so if there are specific issues you're having, please call my office at 323-965-1422, 323-965-1422. Because one thing I can say is that we do have an administration now that will return phone calls. I'm telling you, under 4 years with Trump, they were actually ordered not to return the calls of Democrats. And so we couldn't even, if you called my office and asked for help with the administration, we wouldn't have been able to help you, but we can now. So if you call my office, maybe we can put you in touch with the right person from the Small Business Administration, because I promise you, when we worked on the bills and when we passed the bills, we had you in mind. And so one of the things that I'm also concerned about is how much theft, fraud, and abuse. It's funny because usually when those terms are used, waste, fraud, and abuse, they're only talking about poor people. And we know that there was just grand theft over these funds with people doing all sorts of things. And my colleague, Mr. Clyburn, is chairing a committee that is actually doing the oversight, and they're looking for examples of where, there were problems. Of course, looking for positive examples as well. But please call my office, and maybe there's something that we could do for you most specifically. We can go to our first poll question.
All right, excellent. Let's take that first quick poll and right back to your question. So you'll vote on the keypad on your phone to respond to this poll. We want to know if you are interested in getting future updates from the office of Congresswoman Karen Bass. Please press 1 right now on the keypad on your phone. So again, if you are interested in getting future updates from the office of Congresswoman Karen Bass, please press 1. I'll leave that open right now. Everyone go ahead and vote right now. We have hundreds already weighing in saying that by pressing 1 that yes, they want to continue receiving updates from the office of Congresswoman Karen Bass. And I'll turn this back to you, Congresswoman.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for participating in the poll. You know, the last time we did this, oh, good, everybody likes the updates. Okay, we'll keep doing them. The last time we did this, we asked if you were interested in a physical town hall, but that was before Omicron, or however you pronounce it. And so hopefully we'll ask that question sometime next year. George from Westwood was asking, what is happening at the federal level to end the homelessness crisis? You know, I hate telling people from LA this because it's not good news. You know, the homelessness issue that we are dealing with here is not really dealt with all over the country. So many of my colleagues, you know, kind of look at us in the big cities and don't quite understand what we're going through, and they can't even comprehend the level of the problem here. I mean, you realize we have more people unhoused than a lot of counties. Entire counties don't have populations of 40,000. And the population in LA is 40,000 in just the city, 20,000 more. And so the magnitude of the problem is so massive here. And that's why I believe we really need to consider it like a man-made disaster, that you go into crisis mode and say, we're not just going to go through the routine to have this done, to deal with this. So in HUD, Housing and Urban Development, the secretary of HUD, Marcia Fudge, who happens to be a good friend of mine and colleague and neighbor, she heads up a national task force on homelessness. And I've been talking to her a lot about this problem because I'm trying to look at what can we do now in HUD, now that we are back in charge, because, again, for 4 years we couldn't even talk to HUD. What can we do now to expedite the dealing with the issue here? So, for example, I'm trying to push for flexibility with vouchers, so we're not so restricted where vouchers can be used. And then looking at Homeland Security, the secretary there, Mayorkas, to ask, well, can FEMA help? Looking at HHS, Health and Human Services, with our Javier Becerra, our former member of Congress, former Attorney General, what can they do to help provide mental health treatment and substance abuse? So I'm trying to take full advantage of the fact that being in D.C. allows me access to all of these federal agencies and the cabinet and the White House to raise alarm about what we're dealing with here. But I just can't express to you enough the frustration from the last 4 years, where really it wasn't until January of this year, and actually it was later, because if you remember, the president had a lot of trouble with the transition and a lot of trouble getting his nominees confirmed. And so the agency started late. But since I'm there and since I have access to all of these people, I'm trying to work with them right now to say, what changes can we bring about right now? And Horatio from Windsor Hills is asking, how would a person be able to apply for one of those well-paid infrastructure jobs that are coming to L.A.? Metro. Definitely go on the website and look at Metro, because there is specific recruitment there. And I'm sorry, it seems as though you're having a lot of feedback on the call. I'm not sure if that is in general. How about if Walter Edwards from the 8th District has a question?
Great. Yeah, let's get Walter. Walter, you're live. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hello, Karen Bass, Congresswoman. Thank God, for you and your service and all you do for our community. I am from Los Angeles, and I have a question because I speak on faith. I go to West Angeles Church of God in Christ, and I say you're going to be the mayor of Los Angeles. So Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles. So my question is, under the war on drugs, Los Angeles, California has allowed us to get cannabis licenses, but under the social equity program. And I just want to know what your take is on that, if you have any idea on that, thinking about coming to Los Angeles and being the mayor here.
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your comments and your support. I do have to say, though, that this particular call is a call that is paid for with taxpayer dollars, and it is in my official capacity as a member of Congress. And so I can't get into a political discussion now. But let me just say, in terms of the war on drugs, look, I believe that one of the reasons why we have 40,000 people on the street today is because of very bad policies from the 90s. And those policies start with the war on drugs. I view addiction as a health issue. And unfortunately, what has happened in our county over the last, I would say, 10 or 15 years is the dismantling of a layer of services that we used to have. We used to have residential drug treatment programs where you could be an addict on the street for years, enroll in a program, live there for a year, and graduate to another program so that you really had 2 years to recover, and those programs were run by people who were in recovery. Well, unfortunately, when the Affordable Care Act was passed, it tried to upgrade that system, and in the course of upgrading it, many of the programs actually closed because they were loaded with a lot of additional requirements. And so that is something that we really need to fight for again, because we don't really have a system that's adequate. We have a system. We don't have a system that's adequate on mental health, nor do we have a system on substance abuse. And those are two major categories of the people who are unhoused. So it's one thing to say you want to get people off the street, but if you don't take care of the reason why they were on the street to begin with, it's only going to be temporary. So I've been working on this issue for many, many years, but the last 10 years were very, very difficult because I knew the system was going to collapse. And I couldn't do anything about it because, remember, when the Republicans were in control of everything, all they wanted to do was destroy the Affordable Care Act. So they didn't want to fix any of the problems with the Affordable Care Act. And, you know, anytime you have a massive piece of legislation like the Affordable Care Act, after you pass it, you have to spend 5 or 10 years fine-tuning it, fixing it, because you can't pass a major piece of legislation like that and be able to predict every unintended consequence. So now that we actually have an administration and that we are in charge, what I'm doing now is, instead of trying to legislate everything, I'm just trying to work directly with the administration because of the obvious reasons of why it's so hard to pass legislation. But now I'm hoping that the administration might be able to fix it. I'm worried, though, that the sentiment of our city is getting to be very angry and hopeless. And when those kind of atmospheres take over, politicians tend to pass very, very, very bad policies. And I believe that the answer to drug addiction is drug treatment and not incarceration. And so I'm worried that the pendulum is getting ready to swing back again to incarcerating a health problem. And I don't want to see that happen because it doesn't work. I mean, that's the bottom line. It just doesn't work. Eric from one of the neighborhoods a little bit outside of the district is asking a question.
All right, perfect. Yes. Eric, you are live right now. Please go ahead with your question.
Thank you for taking my question. I agree with a couple of earlier callers and questioners. I'm deeply shocked by the level of anti-democratic sentiment and this being expressed around the United States today, along with obvious and overt attempts at voter suppression. And so I don't want to be redundant, but could I ask you to say a little bit more about strategies that you can that you find to be most effective pushing back against what I can only call authoritarian sentiment?
You just couldn't have said it better. One of the ways I talk about it, and you can be the judge as to whether or not it's effective, because I focus on foreign policy. I'm just shocked at what is going on in this country, because when other countries do what is taking place in the United States right now, voter suppression, changing the rules, setting up the basis to overturn elections, gerrymandering so that the people who are elected don't reflect the populations, all of those things, when other countries do those things, we sanction them and we cut their foreign assistance. And I'm supposed to, as a member of Congress focused on foreign policy, I'm supposed to go around the world shaking my finger at people, telling them the best ways to organize their democracy, and we have the situation that we do. So it is the height of hypocrisy from my point of view. And I think that, what I have found is so important is really talking to people about it and pointing out how extreme this is. Because, if you look at totalitarian regimes around the world, they don't happen overnight. They slowly happen. And that is the direction that we are headed in this country now. And we need to do everything we can to prevent this from going on, which is why I think it's so important that the task force, the select committee, that Chairman Benny Thompson is in charge of, gets to the bottom of it. We need to wrap up the call now. We're about to approach an hour. Let me just say a few things. Number one, at the end of the year, I definitely want to thank the very, very, very hardworking staff in the Capitol and also in Los Angeles. They do work that they often don't get credit for because I get all the credit. But be clear that the office functions and your casework is handled and your calls are answered, not because of me, but because of the staff of the 37th District. So I want to thank them for all of their work this year. They had more than 400 cases. That means constituents calling up and having different problems. And so some of the issues that they had to deal with was the backlog of passports, because nobody was really traveling last year and everybody decided they were going to go all over the world. This year, there was just incredible pressure to assist constituents with passport issues. Immigration issues, some left over from last year where people were stranded when travel was cut down, but a lot of immigration related issues. The Small Business Administration, like the caller that spoke a few minutes ago. And then I think our number one case complaint by everybody is the U.S. Postal Service. So anybody that is listening, if you want to sign up for our email newsletter and telephone town halls, you can do that at bass.house.gov/sign-up, bass.house.gov/sign-up. You can stay informed and stay involved. You can find me, of course, on all of the various social media platforms, Facebook, we're supposed to say Meta now, Twitter and Instagram, at Rep Karen Bass, R-E-P Karen Bass. I look forward to next year and hopefully seeing you all in person. Don't give up on BBB, free preschool for all, child care, care for our elders, the child tax credit, thousands of vouchers, resources to keep people in homes, resources to help people buy homes, strengthening the Affordable Care Act, all of these issues, programs, resources we need in our district. Thank you so much. Thank you for all of your support. The constituents of the 37th District are always so kind to me. When you see me in the grocery store, you tell me how you love the telephone town halls, and we plan to do more and more of them. Good evening. Have a safe and wonderful and healthy holidays, get tested, get vaccinated, get boosted. Good evening.